And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB. Discover the latest trends shaping digital assets across Africa. Download the Absa Africa Digital Assets Insights 2025. 9 minutes after 6. Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes. Looking forward to a conversation with Francois Rogers. He's the MEC for Finance in KwaZulu-Natal. Itala, the financial institution, looks like they're going to be able to pay depositors before Christmas. You can imagine the anxiety around it. The Prudential Authority saying that Itala is actually technically insolvent. A lot of numbers to look at, but we'll speak to the MEC in just a moment. I know most of the conversation around the panel that will look at who will be the new National Director of Public Prosecutions has been around Menzi Simelane. He's a former NDPP who was removed because it turned out, as the Constitutional Court said, he had not been appointed properly. The issue is that there was a finding by Frini Janwala that he had prima facie lied under oath, and that's never been sorted out. How Menzi Simelane ended up on that shortlist, I have absolutely no idea. But there are other issues around the NPA, and Busi Mavuso from Business Leadership South Africa is calling for much deeper reform. You'll hear from her in a few moments as well. And then a lot more cars being sold, it would appear, and particularly new cars. This is according to NAMSA. I do wonder if the sort of cheaper Chinese models are having an impact there. We'll look at why our PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index, is slightly lower before 7 o'clock, and have a look at how life insurance has changed over the last 20 years. Good to hear from you tonight. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567, and of course voice notes this evening on 072 702 1702.
702. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
A report in Business Day this afternoon, Business Live, I should say, that the World Health Organization has now changed its recommendations on how to use the new weight loss drugs, the semaglutides and all the things. They all have all sorts of names, but I think you know the ones that I'm talking about. In the past, they've been used primarily to help treat diabetes, now being used to deal with obesity and weight loss. And the WHO has now changed their guidelines so they can be used, and it recommends that they be used for weight loss. And this has all sorts of consequences, because it also means then that our government, for example, might at some point want to use these drugs to treat obesity in people in state hospitals. But it may also have implications for medical aids. And I don't know if you have a view on whether these drugs, they've been around for a little while, they do seem to be safe, there's been a lot of research on them, there's a huge amount of money that'll be made from them by the pharmaceutical companies. But I can't help but wonder if we're getting closer to an era where actually lots of people are going to be on them. People you know, if you're not on them yourself. And I bump into some people from time to time who I sort of look at and I say, what's the polite phrase? You're looking well. And sometimes they tell you what they're doing. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just have a lot more willpower than I do. I do think we're moving to an era in which we might find that governments and medical aids actually do pay for weight loss drugs. I don't know if you think they should or if they shouldn't. Would you use them? Have you used them? 011 883 0702 021 446 0567, and of course your voice notes on 072 702 1702.
The Money Show
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
An announcement today from the KwaZulu-Natal Premier, Tommy Ntuli, that people with money in the financial institution Itala will be able to get their money out before Christmas. The Prudential Authority took over the institution's affairs 2 years ago, saying an exemption that allowed it to take deposits had lapsed. It could continue taking people's money illegally. The KwaZulu-Natal provincial government owns the institution. There's been a big court battle about this as well. The MEC for Finance in KZN is the DA's Francois Rogers. MEC, good evening, and thank you for the time today. I do appreciate it. What did you have to do to ensure that people can get their money out? What kind of arrangements have you now made?
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to your listeners. It's been a difficult and hard journey. You'll remember in January, the repayment administrator that was appointed by the Prudential Authority basically hamstrung Itala and shut it down. Didn't just shut down the actual depositors side of it, but shut down the entire bank. And as you so rightly said, we've been in and out of court with the repayment authority because we felt that he'd exceeded his mandate, which two court rulings found in our favor, and the RA continued to appeal it. Be that as it may, what we eventually did, and in negotiations with the Minister of Finance, we got a 2.2 billion rand loan from national government, which that with the 1 billion rand that Itola has cash backed in the bank itself. We are now in a position to ensure that every single rand that is deposited in Itola will be able to be accessed by those particular clients. Also, what's more, we've been told now that the RA will pull out of Itola and deal with the distribution of the funds to the account holders, and that the liquidation application by the PA will be suspended.
Okay, so the money that's being paid out isn't all Itola's money. 2/3 of it is government's money.
So 2.2 billion rand, as you rightly say, is a loan that's been given to us. And of course, that's backed up by the current situation. We have a loan book of 1.977 billion rand in Itola, which has guarantees of 3.2 billion rand. You know, so if you add the 1 billion onto the 1.9 billion, then you can see that this is why we've also said we fail to understand why there's, this accusation that the assets are shorter than, or the assets, liabilities exceed the assets.
Well, the Prudential Authority said that it had done an audit, an independent audit, and made the finding, it was the audit that made the finding Itola was technically insolvent.
Well, it's certainly not the figures we have at hand. And what we have at hand is the figures that are produced by the bank account. So, and it's certainly nothing that the Auditor General picked up in their report. This is why we've been in and out of court and why we defended the liquidation application.
Okay, but then just explain to me why you need to borrow money to pay depositors who deposited money at Itola. They put the money in. If Itola was in such a strong financial position, the money would still be there. On the face of it, it would seem it's not there, and that's why you need to borrow this money.
So, Stephen, I'm not a banker. Let me firstly put that on the table. I have no experience other than having to borrow myself from a bank. But my understanding is there is no banking commercial institute that can back its depositors rand by rand.
Sure.
Because what banks do is they take money, they then lend it out on a bond or a car, finance, etc., etc. So you've got to look at the overall picture. Rather than saying, does Itola have rand for rand on the depositor's money? No bank has that. That's my understanding.
Okay, so that may be the case, and I think you must be right on that. But then you will still, if Itola doesn't actually have the money, and if the PA is right, and it is technically insolvent, this loan that you've received, one day I presume the provincial government, as the owner of Itola, would have to pay back.
Indeed, but let's assume, for argument's sake, in the banking environment, we had to call in all the loans. It's just short of 2 billion rand. We then would not have had to borrow the money. We would have been some 200 million short. So that's the reality. The other situation we've got is that because the RA shut down the bank's operations, people have not been able to, those people who've been paying off their loans and their bonds that are doing it on debit orders, they've not paid for the last 8 months because the account's been closed. You've got to add that revenue into the loans balance. So, it's fine detail, but at the end of the day, we believe we'll get out of this situation. And the most important thing to us, Stephen, is that the depositors are going to get their money. That was what worried us as government.
Sure. I mean, of course, it is the most important thing in all of this. But the bank also was taking money was taking depositors' money illegally and was not ring-fencing that money in the way it was supposed to. Are you going to be able to make sure that never happens again?
We have to do that. Stephen, we're going to have to make the difficult call at now that the money is being guaranteed for the depositors, that we need to have an inquiry. We need to determine how we got here, why we got here, and there needs to be accountability because, somebody created this mess and somebody needs to be held accountable for it.
All right. So Francois Rogers, thank you. I really do appreciate the time. The MEC of Finance in KwaZulu-Natal.
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
19 minutes after 6. Well, as a panel prepares to meet to consider who should be the new National Director of Public Prosecutions, the CEO at Business Leadership SA, Busi Mavuso, calling for much wider reform around the National Prosecuting Authority. Busi Mavuso, good evening and thank you for your time. Obviously, the person who leads the NPA is important, but why do you believe we need a much bigger reform than that?
Stephen, good evening. Look, I think the issue of the rule of law is essential to a functioning democracy. It's essential to the country. When you look at the business-government partnership and you look at the three work streams that we're actually focusing on, crime and corruption is the one that is actually lagging behind. But also, our criminal justice system, Stephen, is in shambles. Of the progress that we have made as a country, there is that recognition that strengthening of the criminal justice system is critical. You don't need to look far. Stephen, just listen to the Madlanga Commission to understand how compromised our system is. The current process, therefore, of appointing an NDPP should be used as a nexus for the reforms required to strengthen the NPA's independence. Yes, the NPA is just but one institution, a very critical one that is responsible for prosecutions, but then there is not that much independence that they actually have. I mean, look at the fact that it was the president who actually had to suspend Advocate Andrew Chauke of Gauteng, not Shamila, after Shamila had raised this for 2 years of her concerns around the advocates' fitness to hold office, as it were. So we're just saying that, as much as the responsibility has been placed on the committee, to select the right candidate, their job would be incomplete, Stephen, if they don't use the backdrop of the Nkwanazi inquiry of what is coming out of the Madlanga Commission to ensure that this is a holistic exercise which will not only recommend who needs to be appointed, but use the current context to recommend to the president the necessary reforms that will be required to ensure that the NPA can have real teeth. So it's an opportunity. Let's just do the full job. Why are we doing half bits?
I mean, the issue around the independence of the NPA goes all the way back to the decision by then President Thabo Mbeki to fire Vusi Bakoli in 2007. And there was the conflict then with the Justice Ministry. Do you think in all of that time there's been no change because there's no political will? I mean, it might suit someone in government to have a little bit more power over the NPA than they should.
There's actually been very little change, because when you look at what the Constitution says, and as far as the NPA is concerned, Section 179 under Section 32 of the NPA Act, you will see that as much as it speaks about impartiality and oath and affirmation by members of the prosecuting authority, it actually doesn't really give it much power. It talks about the fact that these people, yes, need to take the oath of office, but it really doesn't, ensure that this institution can act independently. Up until today, Stephen, this, as I said earlier on, is a unit, and it is a program within the criminal or the Department of Justice. Why should that continue to be? It's actually being overseen by the DG of the Department of Justice. It doesn't make sense. Shouldn't this institution be put in place as a Chapter 9 institution? What real powers, if you think about it, do they really have? Even when they have to appoint service providers, that is not done within the NPA. It's actually done at the Department of Justice, which therefore weakens Shamila, because she knows what support she actually requires, but she can't go out there to actually procure the support that she needs. It has to be left to someone else. And then we complain as a country about her ineffectiveness, about her inability to could have actually accelerated the prosecutions, but we don't actually look back and say, what power does this woman really have? So it's not about Shamula. It's really about the office. It's really about the country taking seriously the issue of ensuring that we can actually prosecute. It's to ensure, Stephen, that we shouldn't go back to the FATF grey listing. Remember, one of the biggest issues that they raised was our failure to prosecute. But this is an institution that has been seriously compromised. We are naive as a country, Stephen, to think that the corruption, the state capture project was not deep, it was not wide, and it wasn't high. And the Madlanga Commission is actually telling us that. So what interventions, therefore, and what reforms do we need to put in place to ensure that we don't yet put this new candidate with both his hands tied behind their back, and you put them in the boxing ring and you say fight? There is no way that is going to be able to do that. If you don't give him the necessary powers, you can actually deal with what he needs. You can't. How can you not fire your own people, being and CO, as it were? It really cripples you. So I think this actually needs to be a broader engagement, and I think a broader a program that looks at all of these things, Stephen.
Busi Mavuso, thank you so much. CEO at Business Leadership, South Africa.
702. Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
The Automobile Association NAMSA reporting aggregate new vehicle sales up by 12.5% in November compared to the same month last year. The new vehicle market's now 15% ahead of where it was this time last year. Dr. Paulina Mamogobo is the chief economist at NAMSA. Paulina, good evening to you. Thank you. What's driving this quite big surge?
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to your listeners. Yeah, definitely in 2025 as a whole, we actually have seen quite a strong momentum in new vehicle sales. But of course, important to mention is that there are a couple of elements that are driving the surge, right? So if we take a macroeconomic lens, the levers that actually turned in our favor, we've seen inflation easing quite nicely, which consequently led to the reduction of interest rates. Of course, that creates credit availability, and we saw households' disposable income pick up quite nicely. Then consumers being able to also spend on high-ticket price items such as our vehicles. So another element to mention as well, Stephen, is, of course, we've seen the rand strengthening. What that has also done is that it has both the ability to import even into the country. So even on the new vehicle sales side, while we see this boom, important to mention is
Dr. Mamogobo, I don't know if I'm going to ask you just to move around to strengthen the cell phone reception there. I know some of the people bringing new Chinese cars into the market don't report their figures to you. We know that there are many of them. I would imagine cheaper new cars on the market might be behind this as well.
Certainly. So, Stephen, hopefully you can hear me properly now.
Yeah,
when we look at our year-to-date figures, especially for the new light vehicles, we look at about 69% of those vehicle sales composing of imported vehicles, and then 31% being of locally manufactured vehicles. Like you mentioned, that we have had new reportees, 5 new Chinese make in the domestic market, increasing the model derivatives that are available. And actually, 18% of total new vehicle sales are actually those that are emanating from China as a market in particular. So that has contributed quite significantly. Also because these vehicles are coming in at a very competitive price point. And of course, even in terms of usability, we see them selling crossover SUVs, which have a duality of use in urban areas and of course in the other terrains that would be outside of the urban areas. So that has contributed quite significantly as well in terms of our new vehicle sales performance.
You mentioned interest rates and many other economic factors. Is the fuel price a factor in how many new cars are bought? Because I would have thought, the fuel price when you buy a car isn't the fuel price when you've had it for 2 years. Is it really a factor?
I think it's more of a psychological factor. So what happens is that it just creates one of those softens the overall cost of vehicle ownership. So it's not that consumers necessarily would look at it and determine buying a car in November because vehicle fuel prices were down. But of course, they factor that in terms of the long-term affordability or cost of vehicle ownership. So when we see fuel prices going down, then we also see consumer sentiment, because that's consumer behavior, actually picking up and also driving the appetite for vehicles, because consumers know that they can actually afford even to move around because there's that reduction in fuel costs as well.
Dr. Paulina Mamogobo, thank you so much, Chief Economist at the National Automobile Association of South Africa.
The Money Show.
The Markets.
Tana Mongwe is a portfolio manager at Macro Solutions at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Tana, good evening. Quite a big announcement from Remgro today. They're taking over the South African operations of Mediclinic completely.
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to your sisters. Yes, the that was actually a welcome announcement on the cautionary that they announced today, because I think it does simplify the operating model, allowing them to focus on Mediclinic South Africa, whereas IHL gets to focus on, the Switzerland business, which they're closer to and can manage more closely, especially in the context of, the current environment where healthcare is becoming more complicated with regulatory burdens, and, the cost of healthcare just keeps going up, while there's pricing pressure as well. So I think it just gives Remgro that simplification in terms of managing their South African operations. But they still have the joint interest in the Middle East business.
Standard Bank, a 10-month update today. Sort of steady as she goes, really. They're not changing their guidance.
Not changing the guidance, and I think the announcement was quite expected. But Standard Bank has had quite a good run this year, even if you look at it in the context of their own peer group, and particularly within South Africa. And I mean, they keep highlighting this improving confidence within South Africa, which we've been seeing across the board. But they're highlighting growth in the loan book, growth in investment banking. They're talking about higher customer engagements that's driving fee revenue or non-interest revenue. They're talking about, jaws, positive jaws in terms of revenue growth above cost growth, and just overall executing the way they've been this year. But what's also very, very interesting over the past few years, we've seen this integration of banks moving into insurance, insurers moving into banks. And Standard Bank went to highlight in this update that, within the life business, that's doing well, improving persistency and risk experience within South Africa. And within the short-term insurance business, what we've seen across the board with other short-term insurers in South Africa, lower claims ratios because of low natural catastrophe events driving earnings. So overall, a very good update, and they've just been executing as they've told us. But we look to next year in the Capital Markets Day to see how they reach that ROE target that they've provided.
And Clarissa, I mean, you would think a platinum group metals producer would be doing everything they could to increase production. Their production was slightly down.
Yeah, unfortunately, geology and weak grades. That is just the nature of mining. It was a bit of a mixed result there. Overall earnings were low. And you just have there are generally a more diversified miner in the precious metals, but you have chrome prices coming down with production coming down. You've got PGM's production coming down, but positively offset by the rally we've seen in PGM prices. I mean, the previous call you spoke about strong vehicle sales, and we've seen that across the board globally. And that's also been with the supply shortages, a big driver of PGM prices year to date. So a bit of a mixed bag over there, but it's geology and weak and lower grades that unfortunately does have an impact on the result at the end of the day.
Tana Mongwe, thank you so much. Portfolio Manager at Macro Solutions at the Old Mutual Investment Group.
WhatsApp Stephen
on 072
702
1702.
Well, keen to hear your view on whether you think government and medical aids should be in the business of paying for some of these weight loss drugs. They are certainly, you're seeing in other countries that people are doing that. As I say, the World Health Organization changing its recommendations to actually suggest that governments do that these drugs should be used for weight loss. You look at the cost of obesity in our society, in any society, what it leads to. I mean, I imagine there's a link to diabetes, for example. All of these things, if you can make a difference at the very beginning of someone sort of becoming overweight or becoming obese, rather, you could make a huge difference over time to their life, but also to the amount of money you'll have to pay out as a government. It's a bit like stopping smoking. It makes a huge difference, even though it can be at a relatively small difference at the very beginning. I don't know, you might have greater insight into this, but something is going on in the ANC at the moment, where Joe Pagla, the Deputy Health Minister, issuing a public statement denying that he's behind any claims of wanting to remove President Cyril Ramaphosa as leader of the ANC. There's National General Council in just sort of a week's time of the ANC. There's been very little discussion about it, but next week I think we will be talking about it. And certainly it would seem there's some sort of rumbling going on in there. I can't quite work it out myself. Your voice notes tonight, 072 702 1702.
702 with Stephen Grootes.
Email him on stephen@702.co.za.
Just gone 6:45. Good evening. The ABSA Purchasing Managers Index dropping significantly in November. Export sales were weaker. The Purchasing Price Index down too, meaning manufacturers might have slightly lower costs. Silo Sakele is an economist at ABSA. Silo, good evening. What were the main drivers behind a lower Purchasing Managers Index? What pushed it down, it seems, quite sharply?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So the main drivers were four in the main. So the index is made up of 5 sub-indices, but we saw 4 drop. But the story is in the 2 sub-indices that fell. So we saw new sales orders, which measures demand, fall quite sharply. And when you look closely at the data, as we have seen recently, the export side of demand has been quite weak and remained weak. But this time it looks like the main decline came from the domestic market. And then the other index that fell sharply is output. So as demand falls, output tends to fall. So those are the two drivers that led to a lower PMI number.
The new sales order index was down as well. I mean, that's quite a strong symptom of what seems to be going on.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I said. So the new sales orders is measures mainly demand, and that's where we saw the main drop. I mean, the way it fell, it took the headline PMI to levels that we last saw in COVID-19 times. So it just goes to show how weak business conditions have been in the manufacturing sector.
People are expecting business conditions to improve. I mean, they seem actually a bit more optimistic than what the numbers tell us.
Yeah, so people are expecting business conditions to improve, but it looks like they have not yet improved, because what the PMI measures is not sentiment, but what's actually happening in the ground. So the way the PMI survey is structured is such that it's evidence-based.
I mean, and then you've also got employment that seems to be ticking slightly higher, and I'm a bit surprised to see that when so many of the other indices are heading lower. You wouldn't think employment would be going up at all.
Yeah, good observation, Stephen. So here I want to say that, yes, employment went up, the index went up, but it remained below the 50 neutral level. So what that shows us is that employment actually continued to fall, but by a slower rate. So the employment story still remains quite bleak.
Selo, I mean, if we look at all of the information we've seen around us, there's been a lot of sort of headlines. Look, we've had good news, hooray. I think, in a way, your survey is taking some of the gloss off of that. But it would also explain, once again, why our growth is so low and probably this year less than 1%.
Yeah, I mean, because of exactly things like weak business conditions as well as weak business confidence. So we've seen investment numbers not doing well, especially, on the private side as well. For this year, we're looking at investment numbers that are in the negative. So that's why we having this sub-1 growth. But for as ABSA, we think that growth will be a bit better, just over 1% at 1.3%. And then going forward, that's where we are quite bullish about growth as investment starts to improve at the back of improving business sentiment.
I mean, it's not related to your survey much, but there does seem to be a little bit of evidence that construction is changing. There are a lot more people being employed in construction. You would think that if we build that infrastructure, there'll be knock-on effects from the build that will lead to all sorts of changes that might one day be picked up by your survey.
Yeah, so, when you talk about construction, I mean, that's one of the sectors that have been really weak and that have really struggled to recover from the COVID-19 lockdowns. So we know that the issues there are many, and then one, it has to do with construction mafias, right? So it looks like the law and order issue is also showing up here. So the way the manufacturing sector is, it has backward and forward linkages. So if there's improvement in construction, you will also see the manufacturing, because manufacturers manufacture for the construction guys as well. So that's why we like to track this sector, because exactly of these forward and backward linkages.
Selo, thank you very much indeed for the time. Selo Sakele is an economist at ABSA. 10 minutes now to 7. How are you feeling about your industry at the moment? Are things looking up? Are things still looking a bit down? Are things looking kind of 2020-ish still?
The Money Show, Stephen Grootes, is brought to you by ABSA CIB. Discover the latest trends shaping digital assets across Africa. Download the ABSA Africa Digital Assets Insights 2025.
8 minutes now to 7 the time. Well, Discovery Life celebrating their 25 years of existence. And if you think about how the life insurance business was in the year 2000 and how it is now, I imagine they're very, very different things. Gareth Friedlander is the Deputy CEO of Discovery Life. Gareth, good evening. A lot of innovation over the last 25 years. I mean, your industry has changed, I think, almost fundamentally.
Hi, Stephen. Yes, thanks for having me here. It certainly has been a journey over 25 years, and the whole industry has transformed, I think, dramatically over that period of time. We really have seen tremendous innovation in the South African insurance industry, and largely to the benefit of consumers.
What do you think the biggest changes have been? I mean, you are still managing money, and you are managing money in case of events, but the way in which you manage money has changed.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes came when we entered the market back in 2000, when we kind of separated out the old traditional universal life type policies that combined kind of risk with investment, and we separated it out into this very efficient risk-only product, and that kind of saved 30% of the premium for the consumer, and pretty much the whole industry moved to these new generation products over the next 2 or 3 years. So I think that was one of the big innovations. And then I guess the real game changer for us as a business came with the whole vitality concept and what we now call the shared value insurance model, and really just understanding how to change people's behavior to incentivize healthier kind of outcomes and positive behavior change in consumers, and turning that into money, literally. And that's been something that we've been able to do very successfully. I'm
frankly always amazed at what someone will do for a cappuccino. I mean, it's a cappuccino, for goodness sake. And yet it's become standard. I mean, I think the way that business is going to be done is the way that people are going to sort of, companies are going to manage their risk. It's the way that people are going to manage their lives. I mean, it's a fascinating change.
Yeah, I think it's so intuitive, right? Insurance is no longer a world where you just are there with a bunch of actuaries to try and determine what the risk is. The world's, come a long way from that, and it makes sense to try and help people change their risk and, improve their outcomes and their risks and their health and wellness. And you can actually create money in the system that never previously existed when you do that effectively. And obviously, in the world of big data and AI and where we're going from a kind of global industry perspective, I think the opportunity is even greater.
Do you think that over time, in sort of real terms, that's made life insurance premiums cheaper for people? Overall, it's actually a cheaper product than it was?
Certainly we've seen that. Firstly, the efficiency created by kind of separating out risk from investment. We expected that was about a 30% reduction in kind of the base premium. But then on top of that, we know that for our clients who engage in health and wellness, and we obviously measure that by their vitality status, we see that the clients who are most engaged have about a 57% lower mortality rate compared to clients who aren't on the program or who aren't engaging in the program. That's massive. That's more than halving your death rate each year through, consistent behavior change. And that unlocks money in the system. That creates paybacks that you can pay to clients or cheaper premiums for clients. You can actually see the rands and cents coming through. It was 2.4 billion rand paid through shared value benefits for clients looking after their health and wellness last year alone. So life insurance paradigm has shifted a little bit from something that only pays out when you die to something that now can start to pay out during your lifetime on good events as well.
You say the protection gap is getting wider. In other words, fewer of us as a percentage are protected. We're not as protected as we used to be. What's changing? Is it just because of a tough economy and people are putting their money into something else, or it just sort of goes a little bit further down the list?
Yeah, we did see the CSIR gap study released last month, and the insurance gap widened to over 50 trillion, which is a crazy number, up from 35 trillion 3 years prior. So kind of a 12.5% annual growth rate, which is a little bit scary to see. Not all of it is necessarily bad. You know, part of what determines that gap is having earners and having people. When you earn an income, you need insurance to replace that income. So, you know, some of it comes from a little bit of growth, ironically. But, yeah, to a large extent, it's just clients not having sufficient cover to, you know, leave enough behind for their loved ones in the event of death or disability. We see that on average, South Africans have about 39% of what they need. So there's like a 61% insurance gap there.
I mean, I have to say, I don't see that changing for years, simply because, you know, so many people are just getting by. And yes, they want to do things. They obviously want to leave something for the people they might leave behind. They just don't have the means. Where that's slightly different is what people will pay for, and what they do pay for is funeral insurance.
Yeah, that's right. And it is such a difficult thing to change in terms of, as you say, you're dealing with an end consumer who is already stretched dramatically. I think the thing to keep in mind is it's much easier to try to close the gap now before the event than afterwards. You know, if the event happens to the family, you've somehow got to find an extra income, which is almost impossible at that point in time, or cut your living expenses, as opposed to spending a little bit more each month. I know it's easy to say and not always easy to do, but it's actually not that difficult in terms of percentage terms if we think ahead and plan properly from an insurance perspective.
We're seeing a lot happen in the insurance ecosystem. Do you see more cover coming available for more people at a cheaper price? I mean, I think the sort of efficiencies that have been built into the system, will that process continue?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that it will. I think the digitization, the onset of technology and where AI is going should help make accessibility to insurance slightly easier. I think we've made strides as an industry in kind of bringing that price down as much as we can. Ultimately, I think the best way to bring that price down is really with methods that focus in on reducing risk for individuals and creating the ability to kind of change that as I mentioned with the kind of shared value approach.
Gareth Friedlander, thanks very much indeed, the Deputy CEO of Discovery Life. In a moment, we'll talk about what's happened to Bitcoin. It really seems to be not quite falling off a cliff, but certainly going downhill fast for the moment. And don't forget How I Make My Money tonight, the comedian Vafa Naragi. You with The Money Show. It's 7 o'clock.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB. Discover the latest trends shaping digital assets across Africa. Download the Absa Africa Digital Assets Insights 2025. Good evening, I'm Stephen Grootes. 6 minutes after 7 the time. We'll talk about Bitcoin in a moment. Everything seemed to be going right for Bitcoin, and yet it's really had a month of sustained losses again today, quite dramatically. We'll talk about that in a moment. We'll also look at the world of books. We'll speak to Ian Mann. The book is Anointed, The Extraordinary Effects of Social Status in a Winner-Take-Most World by Toby Stewart. Interesting conversations there. And then also How I Make My Money tonight, Vafa Naragi. He started out as a civil engineer. He's now a comedian. I've got to tell you, I've heard of some short lefts in my life, but that's one of them. I mean, that's a real right turn, if you get it. And I mean, very much a change in direction to go from one of those things to the other, to comedy. One of the questions I want to ask is, how difficult is comedy really? In other words, can you, under pressure tell a joke in 30 seconds or that sort of thing? I know that there are plenty of people who can do that. I sometimes wonder also to go up on stage when you're not really in the mood. I do wonder how hard that is. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and voice notes, of course, on 072 702 1702.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
More developments this afternoon. EWN been reporting on the situation in Umkhonto Wesizwe, and on Friday last week, Duduzile Zuma Sambodla resigned. She, of course, is facing, she hasn't been charged yet, insofar as I know, but facing claims, she is facing claims, let me put it like this rather, that she was facilitating paying people being paid to go to Russia to fight against Ukraine. And of course, there was another case which seems to me to be unrelated at this point that happened today. But she resigned last week. Then Lucky Montana has resigned as an MP today. And of course, once again, no context really given. What we do know is that he faces all of that action by SARS. And from what we can see, SARS, they've gone public, have a very strong case against him. He denies wrongdoing. But it does make me just wonder what is going on when so few people are able to speak up to defend the organization. The spokesperson is often very professional. You've heard from him many, many times. But it would just seem that there are issues with the caucus. And who do you get to replace these two people? So many questions about what's going on in MK. And MK, you know, you might not agree with what they say. You might not like their leader or whatever. But it does matter. It is the third biggest party in Parliament. I mean, it is an important thing. They are the official opposition because the DA, of course, is in the coalition, the national coalition. It does matter. You do need a strong opposition to ask questions of the government, whether you like the government or not. That is what you need. And I do worry that we don't quite have that at the moment. So when I see things happening within MK and some of the other opposition parties not in the coalition, it weakens governance. And I don't think we think about that point enough. Voice notes on 072 702 1702.
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
Well, Bitcoin suffering another major fall in value today. This morning it was down by 6%. In the last month, it's lost more than $18,000 in value. It's had its biggest dollar loss over a month since May in 2021. Carel de Jager is the research lead for blockchain technology at the CSIR. Carel, good evening. What's driving this huge fall? It's not just Bitcoin, it's other cryptocurrencies as well.
Hi, Stephen. Yeah, so actually, since Bitcoin actually crossed $100,000 to the northern side, actually we saw lots of whales, and whales is a crypto term that we coined it for people that's been holding Bitcoin for many years. So they bought thousands of Bitcoin back in the day. They've actually kind of woken up and started selling heavily into the market at about 100,000. That's why we've seen lots of resistance. But more in the short term, what's happened recently is that Bitcoin's been under significant pressure since an announcement that came out in mid-October, which is that a popular U.S. investment index called MSCI actually removed or is considering to remove MicroStrategy from their index. Now, if they do that, and that decision, by the way, is expected on 15 January next year, if they do that, then there is a high possibility that MicroStrategy would be forced to offload and sell some of its Bitcoin. And we know that MicroStrategy is systemic in the Bitcoin market. They own more than 600,000 coins, which is almost 5% of the total supply. So that would be quite significant for the market, and there's so much fear now at this point that any news like that is just extremely bad for the price.
MicroStrategy, there, if I recall, and Carel, you're the expert, not me, their main aim in life is actually to own Bitcoin. That's what they do. That's where their value comes from. And if they have to sell it, they'll be reducing their own value.
Well, the thing is, there's a metric called the MNAV, and the MNAV is a measure of how much Bitcoin the company actually owns in relation to its market capitalization. So when that is 1, then it means that the net asset value in Bitcoin is more or less the same as all of the market capitalization. But when that is below 1, then they can actually legally be forced to buy back their own shares, to go and sell some of these assets, which is idle, it's not really income producing Bitcoin, to actually support the share price again. We've seen this now with some of the other Bitcoin treasury companies that have very clearly started selling some of their Bitcoin. And the MicroStrategy MNAV now, by the way, is the lowest it's ever been. It's like 1.03 or something like that. So it's extremely close to 1.
Why are the whales selling at $100,000? Why, if they've been invested in it for so long, I mean, they've held Bitcoin for a long time, you would think, I mean, sure, I realize people need to cash out at some point, but if it's got from where it was to 100,000, you'd think it would go higher.
I think it's more of a psychological level than anything else. So we're actually seeing it in the on-chain data. We're seeing that, because the Bitcoin ledger is so transparent, we can actually see where, in which wallets these Bitcoin lie, and we can see when they are moved to the exchanges, and then we can assume that they are selling. And that usually corresponds to the psychological levels, like, for instance, $100,000. But interesting enough, $100,000, we're seeing a lot more than that, than what we did, for instance,
Carel de Jager, you with us?
Seems like,
yeah.
So it seems like, 100,000 definitely being a big psychological level, because we're seeing a lot more movements than what we did, for instance, when Bitcoin hit $10,000 for the first time.
The whole idea of Bitcoin, as I understood it, was that it was going to be a safe haven. It was going to be a currency that could only, this is the argument from the bulls, not the whales, that it was only going to get more expensive. And particularly if there was a Trump administration, Trump had said that he would be a sort of crypto-friendly. And yet, you would think that all of those things would lead to a higher value rather than what we're seeing at the moment. So in other words, despite this sort of being what you would have thought would be crypto's time, things have gone the other way.
Yeah, it did feel a bit like this year like a Selden News type of event. There was the price appreciated significantly into this new administration that took over in the US, and there was a lot of hope for things turning out into the positive. And then when those things actually started happening, we actually didn't. We actually still saw major resistance, as I said, just north of $100,000. So it did feel a bit like a Selden News event, and Bitcoin even used to be very correlated to the M2 money supply, and nowadays, if you still follow that correlation, then there's a fair price for Bitcoin currently at about $200,000. So we're well below that, and there's lots of vacuum for Bitcoin to fill that again. But yeah, definitely not living up to its expectations. I think it's also worth noting that the Bitcoin market is generally very much over leveraged and has been for a few years now. So, every time that the price goes down, it causes mass liquidations. It's almost like just dominoes just falling.
The idea that one firm, in this case MicroStrategy, can be systemic, can hold 5% of the value, and one change by another firm that's not directly involved in crypto could lead to or a series of sort of consequences of really big dominoes falling. I mean, that would make me worry a little bit about investing in the entire sector, just that things go slightly wrong at one firm.
I think there's a bit of an overreaction very recently, and maybe it's because everyone remembers FTX still. So FTX was the MicroStrategy of the previous era, and when they fell, we all know that everything fell with it, and it was just absolutely chaotic. That the market turned on its head entirely, and I think everyone still has very, very clear memories of that, and now applies the same on MicroStrategy. Of course, MicroStrategy, even though they do take on some leverage, I think it's much, much, much lower risk than, for instance, an FTX. It's a completely different structure, and it's not, it's not like there's so much dependence on MicroStrategy, downstream from it on the rest of the industry. And MicroStrategy will never be liquidated entirely. If worst case scenario, they would be forced to sell a little bit of their Bitcoin, but $600,000, something like $70 billion at this point. It's a very, very, very big cash position. So it's not, I think that the market might be overreacting a little.
The long-term case for Bitcoin, is it as strong as its supporters say it was 6 months ago before this sort of quite difficult period?
I think it's stronger than ever. With the governments around the world aligning policies, being accepted on institutional level, there's more and more talks about, global governments and even central banks starting to accept this asset class. There's so much innovation happening behind the scenes. There's so many businesses building onto this asset class and inside this industry. It is definitely stronger than it's ever been. So I have no doubt about the long-term prospects of the asset class. I think it's here to stay. The days that we wonder whether Bitcoin will go back to zero or will disappear overnight, those days are definitely gone. So there's no doubt in my mind that, if you hold on for the long term, you will be rewarded.
Carel de Jager, thank you very much indeed. Really do appreciate the time. Research lead for blockchain technology at the CSIR. As always with investing, I can just hear Warren Ingram in my head. Basically, it is all about the longer term. Interesting, though, that people who've held Bitcoin for so long to get to 100,000 have started to sell. I get that you do have to cash out, but it is still interesting that they've decided to sell rather than hang on even longer. At some point, I suppose you do just need to get the return and get on with it. But still very, very interesting.
The Money Show.
Business books.
18 minutes now after 7. Tonight's book is called Anointed, The Extraordinary Effects of Social Status in a Winner-Take-Most World. It's by Toby Stewart, who is a professor at UC Berkeley. And to look at it tonight, of course, is Ian Mann, the regular book review and MD at Gateways Business Consultants. Ian, been a while. Good evening. This is quite an interesting way of looking at life. The fact that that just a little bit of social status changes your life completely.
Enormously. And I think that it's enormously pervasive. That's one of the most amazing things about it. It defines who you choose, who you value, who you trust. It defines almost everything. Hierarchies have been around since forever. Hammurabi was the first one. Then we got the French, their hierarchies. So it's been around forever, and it's been and is terribly pervasive. 5-year-old kids in the school can tell you who are the smart kids, who are the popular kids, and they know that almost instinctively. Adults, by the way, can do that in about milliseconds. We can walk into a room and we can quickly suss out who's who in the room, and then we respond accordingly. So I think that it's very pervasive, and because we know it's pervasive, but I don't think we've had our consciousness raised enough as to what this really is. But you'll see that it has all sorts of implications that often you're not really aware of. And I think that's when it's a lovely term, anointed. Somebody's given some right to do something which somebody else cannot do without that. And it changes their behavior and it changes everything about them. And we've got all sorts of ways in which we give status. I'll give you just one example. Institutions give status. So if I introduce somebody and I said to him, well, he's a Harvard educated lawyer. That's different from saying he was educated posh. And New York Times reporter, Google engineer. So you are given certain credibility just because of the institutions that you're associated with. It has all sorts of long-term knock-on effects that we need to really consider.
And just to be clear, I think the one thing that status is all about, and to me is inextricably intertwined with, is money.
Yes.
Yes, the position that you hold, and I know in the United States, people in companies go at war over positions. I'm the senior, deputy, vice, whatever. But in the end, it's really about money.
It isn't. The interesting part about it, it's got, it doesn't differentiate people on the basis of anything that matters much. If we go back even to the very beginnings, the hierarchy was based on who my dad was. And somehow or other, if a king married off his child to another royal family, which sounded like a really great idea, except that it definitely depleted the gene pool intellectually. You don't expect that they'd be all that bright. So the idea that it has credence is yes, and it's very pervasive, but it has all sorts of effects that are probably very unlikely and very unintended effects. It seems to be a winner-take-all, but out of complete disproportion. I stand corrected here, but Beyonce has got thousands of times more followers than anybody else. Does that mean that she's 1,000 times better?
And
I think that this is where things get really interesting, because it gives a lot of power, a lot of credibility to people for all sorts of strange reasons and not necessarily intrinsically valuable. It'd be very hard to say that she is thousands of times a better singer than anybody else, or that the person who won Wimbledon and the person who lost deserves to be earning as much money as the next five just for having done it. So once you're involved in this, once you are anointed, things actually can make a genuine difference to your outcomes. And the being anointed is something you can do for somebody else. If I'm anointed, I can anoint other people. And perhaps one of the most interesting ones I came across was interesting examples he uses is Ella Fitzgerald. Extraordinary voice.
Yeah.
But she's a overweight black woman in the 50s, which doesn't give you any chance of success. So she said, look, I make good money. I sing in clubs. I can't get into the real clubs because I'm a black woman and an overweight black woman. And she happened to be friendly with Marilyn Monroe. And Ella Fitzgerald always believed that if I could play in the big clubs, I could make real money. Marilyn Monroe said to one of the big, most important clubs, I'll sit in the front row for the entire week that she's singing.
Sure.
Just that much. And she did. And of course, that just burst onto the scene. So the power of having Marilyn Monroe being a somebody was able to do something for somebody else means that I can anoint people once I have been anointed. And we find this in all sorts of interesting ways. If you think of in the world of fashion, Coco Chanel wears a figure-hugging black dress. That's the little black dress everybody talks about. Now, it might not sound odd today, but in those days, only people who wore black were servants.
Yeah.
So she comes out there with a little black dress, but because she's Coco Chanel, she can pull it off. Princess Di had one made as well. So one of the things I think we should accept about hierarchies, social hierarchies, is that they're very helpful. We know what to wear because somebody else has done it. It so does making all these choices.
Yes. It creates uniforms too. I mean, you can tell if you go to a very fancy event, someone wearing a tux is a guest, someone wearing a suit is working.
Yes.
I mean, it can be incredibly subtle.
Right. Yes. Very subtle. And you can get, it determines so much. But if you look at the real problems of this, if you look at the hiring process, there's a lovely study that was done, I think, in the Boston area. They took a genuine ad and they made up 5,000 fictitious people, and with pretty much exactly the same qualifications. Some had black sounding names.
Yes.
And some had white sounding names. Those people with white sounding names were hired were asked for a second interview with a 50% difference. A huge amount. And it had to do with just because I thought the name triggered. Now, it wasn't that these people are all racist, but it does have almost like a subliminal effect on what we're doing. And perhaps I think the most scary part of all of this is that there's a thing called the Matthew effect. If you remember Matthew from the Bible, to those who've got, they'll get more, and those who don't have will have a whole lot less. And if you think of what happens when somebody's anointed, when the university is anointed, they can get away with so much, but it translates into lots of other ways as well. If you are recognized as having done incredible work as a scientist, you've come up with something really important, the CRISPR, and all of a sudden, because you headed up that department, there were two women who headed up the department at two different universities. But the fact that they did it now will allow them to get much, much more money for research that they want. So once you've got it, you can apply more. If you missed it, you can't get anywhere near there. And I think that the more we are aware of the power of the these hierarchies, the more we can work with them.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily bad. I mean, but we must, I think, calibrate and be very careful about how we do this. What's useful about this is the shortcut. We know in hospitals who's who because the doctors call the shots, and it's very useful because people know what's my job and what's yours. And that in some sense is important. But at the other level, it means that people who should be there can't get there.
Yeah.
And those who shouldn't be there very often are there.
It's how you break in, famously. It's how you get in, how you go from an outsider to an insider. And often you need help from an insider.
Yes, indeed. And we often presume because you've been anointed, you matter more.
Yeah.
One of the loveliest experiments, people get very snobby about wine, and I think I also get a little snobby about wine. But the fact is that they did a whole bunch of tests on really serious wine drinkers, and they had 5 different bottles of wine, different ranges, ranging from really cheap ones to ones that cost $90 a bottle. You just multiply by 20. And they asked these people to test them all, but they didn't just ask what they thought. They put them on MRI on a scanner to see what would go on in their brains. By the way, the same $5 wine was in all the bottles.
Yeah.
And when people thought that they were getting the $90 bottle, their brain actually lit up with pleasure in ways that it shouldn't have if they were able to recognize those differences. So once somebody is anointed as somebody who knows his wine, they are given rights to decide which they shouldn't be getting.
Ian Mann, thank you very much indeed. I really do appreciate it. The book is called Anointed, The Extraordinary Effects of Social Status in a Winner-Take-Most World. It's by Toby Stewart, and Ian Mann is the MD at Gateways Business Consultants.
The Money Show, How I Make My Money.
23 minutes now to 8 the time. Now, I think we can probably agree that South Africa is a good place to be a comedian, but sometimes you still have to work at it. And when you work at being a South African comedian, these are some of the results.
Welcome to Johannesburg, aka Joburg. Now, before we go far, I need you guys to appreciate the risks that were taken to shoot this video. Joburg is not for love. Joburg is for business. But if you do find love, focus on the business. I'm here on Nelson Mandela Bridge, the safest bridge in South Africa. If you happen to be a car moving at 100 kilometers per hour. Sandton, the richest square mile in Africa. Johannesburg is the steering of the African economy. I'm here in front of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, where you can come here and exchange almost any stock. Almost. And if you can't find it here, I'm sure it can't down. Put it down. Are they here? Everyone comes to Joburg for opportunities and a better life. Even pigeons have LinkedIn profiles and fly business class. Marwena, you're still stuck at Terminal P. Do better. Look, I don't know what they're on about, eh? It's all about integrating. I've even touched up on my Zulu. Hey, Booty, how about you let your phone for once, eh? Nobody is from Joburg. The only people who are from Joburg are Paras. We're at Bree Taxi Rank on Lillian Goy Street. Now, this is your iPhone's last location before it decides it does not want to be found anymore. So the thing about Joburg is... The thing about Johannesburg is... Yo! They stole my lines. We're here on Constitutional Hill. Johannesburg is not for small problems. It was the epicenter of the anti-apartheid movement, and more recently, Women for Change, which is a movement against gender-based violence and femicide. Protests in Joburg are like, we are not going home until the country updates its entire operating system.
And doesn't it need it? The voice there of Vafa Naragi, the award-winning comedian. He's from Mahakeng. Vafa, good evening. Thanks so much for agreeing to spend some time with us on The Money Show.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
Am I right? Is South Africa a good place to be a comedian?
Yeah. What defines good? I heard you introduce it that way.
I think a lot of material is where I'm going.
Exactly. Yes. I think plenty of material. Usually, yeah. And then South Africa tends to be quite a humorous society. We don't take anything seriously, so there's almost like there are very little no-go topics. So something goes wrong and we laugh about it, and that's, I guess, how we cope. So it's a wonderful place to enjoy comedy, rather. To be a comedian, good. I mean, if you're talking about a career sense, it takes a little bit of work to make it happen. But yeah, it's definitely a place. Well, then again, almost everybody's a comedian. Because you all got an anecdote or two about like what's happening around you just to cope. So yeah, it's I enjoy being here. Yeah, why not?
You describe yourself as coming from Persian parents, and I presume you mean Iran. Did your family sort of start in South Africa after 1979, or was there a particular time or a moment when you started in South Africa?
So that was when the revolution hit. My dad actually left Iran before that. He went to the States to go and study in like the mid-70s. So he missed the revolution bus altogether and never went back. So he left when he was about 18, went to the States, and then decided to come to South Africa then. And then when he got married to my mom, it was like towards the late 80s. That's when he convinced her to come and move to South Africa. She happened to be in India at the time as well, like not leaving Iran. So they I would say early 80s my dad arrived and mom arrived towards the end of 80s. So that's when they decided to come down here.
You grew up in Mahikeng.
Yes.
And I have this, I mean, I can't recall when I was last in Mahikeng. It might even have had a different name then. And I see it as a sort of sleepy town, and it probably isn't that. I always know that it's a very hot place because the weather is very hot. But you were growing up in this place. You were growing up as, I don't know how many other people had parents from the same country you did. Probably very few. What was that all like? And you have an ability, Vafa, to speak many of our languages. And I mean, I kind of wonder if all of those things kind of flew together because of where you were, when you were, and how you were growing up.
Stephen, where are you from? Which area?
Johannesburg.
Okay, Joburg, born and bred.
Born Cape Town, Joburg, grew up.
Okay. So I think, Mahikeng at the time, Mafikeng, and I think it was Mafikeng before that, and Mabatu. So that was, it was a prominent, pre-94, it was Bophuthatswana, the homeland.
Yeah.
So where South Africa didn't consider that to be part of South Africa, it was like an almost independent state. So what you would find is that Mahikeng, even growing up, was like a melting pot of first of all, like you could during apartheid, during that time in the homeland, everybody could live freely. So people of color were free in the homeland region. So it had a very different culture to it in terms of like openness, freedom of speech. I think a lot of Fat Joe would have done some of his stuff there. Glenn Lewis, KB. There was a lot. Double HP. There's a lot of like artists, whether they were musicians, actors, talk show hosts, that would have done some work in the early days with pop TV and radio pop. So it was a place where like expression was really very like it was free. People were free to express. So not as like constricted as if you were living in apartheid South Africa. So I think that was a culture that came in like pre-apartheid, during the apartheid time. And then when it got integrated into South Africa post-94, then some of it still like remained in a way. So, I mean, even now more recently, so like Casper Nyovest would be from there. So it always, it was a nice, I guess, like, it was a safe space to grow up. No matter what color or denomination you are from. So everybody was accepted. Everybody, you know, it wasn't as intense. Even, you know, the racial issues were not so intense as I would only learn later about some of these dynamics when I had to go to university in Cape Town. About like aspects of how people would have experienced the rest of South Africa. But I would say that like growing up, I didn't note, like sometimes I had to take note that, oh, my skin color is a little bit different or I look different. But growing up, like everybody considered me Tswana. They were just like, oh, this is just one of us. So it was in that sense, it was really easy to, interesting to integrate, and then having to go to Cape Town and then mix with people from the rest of the country, you soon realize that, whoa, there's a lot of different things happening all over the place. I mean, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, sure it does, and thank you. And Vafa, you went to Cape Town. I mean, I had to go and check at least 3 websites to make sure I got this right. Instead of studying comedy, to study mechanical engineering. I mean, there's not a lot that's funny about Mikhail's before me every day. I used to see her. I didn't know her very well. I used to work with her husband too. I know nothing about all of this.
I was going to my second question.
Yes.
Anyway, in the third hour of the show, you'll remember that the South African government is facing criticism for its plan to introduce a chrome ore export tax, with the Minerals Council warning it could harm the country's ferrochrome industry. The tax aims to boost local beneficiation, but industry leaders argue it's the high cost of electricity, which has risen by over 900% since 2007. So that's going to be a conversation in the second hour. And then Tara Ruiz asks a question that you touched upon as I was driving in this evening. And she is asking questions about the Zuma family. Are the Zumas a threat to South Africa's sovereignty and democracy? As we hear of some of what people are interpreting as the implosion of the MK party. And then, of course, the final hour is an open line, and that's the show tonight.
Thank you very much indeed, Aubrey Masango from 8 o'clock. Just gone 7:30, time for the latest Eyewitness News. Marky, good evening.
Thanks, Stephen. Good evening. We begin with developments from Mpumalanga, where a fifth person has been declared dead following a bus crash on the R33 road in the province. The Community Safety Department says preliminary investigations revealed that the driver lost control of the vehicle, which veered off the road and overturned. 6 people are critically injured, while 20 others have minor injuries. Emergency services and police remain on the scene. Former Deputy President of the Africa Maibuya movement, Robert Nwedo, says there was no discord in his resignation from the party. Nwedo, along with several senior leaders, recently left Floyd Shivambu's movement, prompting a complete overhaul of the leadership structure at the newly formed political party. Nwedo held a media briefing in Harton today, where he announced his sole focus will now be on growing his worker union, Mawusa. The Mandashu Workers Union of South Africa largely represents people in a temporary employment like EPWP and CWP programs. Nwedo says his work at Maibuya led to him neglecting the union.
There was a circular which was extremely brutal from the Department of Corporate Governance, which does not give workers no single rights, as if like they are already in symmetry. And then, due to my commitment as a Deputy President of Maibuya Africa, that circular was issued in September. I saw it in November.
It's been a dry season for political parties, with only the Democratic Alliance benefiting significantly from external funding between July and September, as calls mount from civil society groups for greater transparency over political funding. New limits that came into effect during this reporting period now only require political parties to declare donations greater than 200,000 rand. Besides the DA, only the ANC, Action SA and the IFP declared donations over the threshold, while BOSA declared a donation under the limit. But both the ANC and IFP may have fallen foul of the rules. Lindsay Dentlinger has more.
A total amount of only 2.4 million rand has been declared by the 4 political parties in the 3 months of the second quarter, half of this by the Democratic Alliance. It received 500,000 rand from a Mr. W. Leroux and an in-kind and monetary donation of more than 300,000 rand from a regular donor, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. Meanwhile, Action SA leader Herman Mashaba continues to prop up his own party, making 2 donations adding up to 470,000 rand. The ANC only declared a single in-kind donation from the Education and Training Unit of 358,000 rand. However, the declaration was made a day late, and the Electoral Commission has ordered the party to explain why it missed the deadline. The Electoral Commission is also probing one of 2 donations declared by the IFP over concerns that it may be considered foreign funding. This is for an amount of 186,000 rand donated by the Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News.
And the sentiment among South African manufacturers has plunged after the Absa Purchasing Managers Index dropped by a steep 7.2 index points to 42 last month. The index stood at 49.2 in the month prior. The sharp decline was underpinned by deteriorations in 4 of the 5 subcomponents of the headline PMI, with only employment looking slightly better. The Bureau for Economic Research released the latest Absa Purchasing Managers Index today. The reading is at its lowest since the COVID-19 pandemic in April 2020, with export sales remaining weak. A look at your weather. A partly cloudy Tuesday in store for Gauteng, with afternoon showers and thunder showers expected tomorrow. Temperatures will drop to overnight lows of 14 degrees across the province and peak at highs between 25 and 27 degrees. Clear skies for Cape Town, along with moderate southerly winds at a low of 18 and a high of 27 degrees. The top story in Eyewitness News. A 5th person has been declared dead following a bus crash on the R33 road in Mpumalanga.
Beyond every boardroom is a story waiting to be written. A story of a business and its potential, of a community that thrives, a hospital that serves, and energy that powers millions of dreams. It's a story that only gets better with a partner that has the expertise and solutions to make it a reality. At Absa CIB, we are invested in your story, and we invite you to write it with us. because your story matters. ABSA, an authorized FSP and registered credit provider.
Some numbers bring instant stress, like a speeding fine, another petrol price hike, or that one debit order you forgot about again. But not all numbers bring panic. Some bring calm and actual life-saving support. With 24/7 emergency support and over 300 ambulances, ER24 is there when you need us most. Don't wait for an emergency. See it, say it, save it. 084 124.
At Checkers, we do more so you get extra this Christmas with over 2 billion rand in festive savings. Like Coca-Cola Original Taste Less Sugar Soft Drink 2 litres, 2 for 44 rand. And Lancewood Double Cream Yogurt 1 kg, any 2 for 79 rand. Plus, stand a chance to win your share of 7 million rand in prizes. Simply buy any 3 qualifying products and swipe your extra savings card to enter. Valid until Sunday at Checkers. T&Cs apply.
Durbanville Hills pairs perfectly with sunsets, your favorite playlist, and your favorite people. Durbanville Hills pairs really well with your December Friendsmas party. It pairs perfectly with every story. And right now, when you buy any 2 bottles of Durbanville Hills from participating retailers, you could win a 5,000 Rand voucher. Durbanville Hills pairs perfectly with every story. Not for persons under the age of 18. T's and C's apply.
The Money Show. How I make my money.
23 minutes now to 8 the time. Now, I think we can probably agree that South Africa is a good place to be a comedian. But sometimes you still have to work at it. And when you work at being a South African comedian, these are some of the results.
Welcome to Johannesburg, aka Joburg. Now, before we go far, I need you guys to appreciate the risks that were taken to shoot this video. Joburg is not for love. Joburg is for business. But if you do find love, focus on the business. I'm here on Nelson Mandela Bridge, the safest bridge in South Africa. If you happen to be a car moving at 100 kilometers per hour. Sandton, the richest square mile in Africa. Johannesburg is the steering of the African economy. I'm here in front of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, where you can come here and exchange almost any stock. Almost. And if you can't find it here, I'm sure it can't down. Put it down. Are they here? Everyone comes to Joburg for opportunities and a better life. Even pigeons have LinkedIn profiles and fly business class. Marwena, you're still stuck at Terminal P. Do better. Look, I don't know what they're on about, eh? It's all about integrating. I've even touched up on my Zulu. Hey, Booty, how about you let your phone for once, eh? Nobody is from Joburg. The only people who are from Joburg are Paras. We're at Bree Taxi Rank on Lillian Goy Street. Now, this is your iPhone's last location before it decides it does not want to be found anymore. So the thing about Joburg is, the thing about Johannesburg is, yo, he stole my lines. We're here on Constitutional Hill. Johannesburg is not for small problems. It was the epicenter of the anti-apartheid movement, and more recently, Women for Change, which is a movement against gender-based violence and femicide. Protests in Joburg are like, we are not going home until the country updates its entire operating system.
And doesn't it need it? The voice there of Vafa Naragi, the award-winning comedian. He's from Mahakeng. Vafa, good evening. Thanks so much for agreeing to spend some time with us on The Money Show.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
Am I right? Is South Africa a good place to be a comedian?
Yeah. What defines good? I heard you introduce it that way.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of material is where I'm going.
Exactly. Yes. I think plenty of material. Usually, yeah. And then South Africa tends to be quite a humorous society. We don't take anything seriously, so there's almost like there are very little no-go topics. So something goes wrong and we laugh about it, and that's, I guess, how we cope. So it's a wonderful place to enjoy comedy, rather. To be a comedian, good. I mean, if you're talking about a career sense, it takes a little bit of work to make it happen. But yeah, it's definitely a place. Well, then again, almost everybody's a comedian. Because you all got an anecdote or two about like what's happening around you just to cope. So yeah, it's I enjoy being here. Yeah, why not?
You describe yourself as coming from Persian parents, and I presume you mean Iran. Did your family sort of start in South Africa after 1979, or was there a particular time or a moment when you started in South Africa?
So that was when the revolution hit. My dad actually left Iran before that. He went to the States to go and study in like the mid-70s. So he missed the revolution bus altogether and never went back. So he left when he was about 18, went to the States, and then decided to come to South Africa then. And then when he got married to my mom, it was like towards the late 80s. That's when he convinced her to come and move to South Africa. She happened to be in India at the time as well, like not leaving Iran. So they I would say early 80s my dad arrived and mom arrived towards the end of 80s. So that's when they decided to come down here.
You grew up in Mahikeng.
Yes.
And I have this, I can't recall when I was last in Mahikeng. It might even have had a different name then. And I see it as a sort of sleepy town, and it probably isn't that. I always know that it's a very hot place because the weather is very hot. But you were growing up in this place. You were growing up as, I don't know how many other people had parents from the same country you did. Probably very few. What was that all like? And you have an ability, Vafa, to speak many of our languages. And I kind of wonder if all of those things kind of flew together because of where you were, when you were, and how you were growing up.
Stephen, where are you from? Which area?
Johannesburg.
Okay, Joburg, born and bred.
Born Cape Town, Joburg, grew up.
Okay. So I think, Mahikeng at the time, Mafikeng, and I think it was Mafikeng before that, and Mabato. So that was, it was a prominent, pre-94, it was Popututuana, the homeland.
Yeah.
So where South Africa didn't consider that to be part of South Africa, it was like an almost independent state. So what you would find is that Mahikeng, even growing up, was like a melting pot of first of all, like you could during apartheid, during that time in the homeland, everybody could live freely. So people of color were free in the homeland region. So it had a very different culture to it in terms of like openness, freedom of speech. I think a lot of Fat Joe would have done some of his stuff there. Glenn Lewis, KB. There was a lot. Double HP. There's a lot of like artists, whether they were musicians, actors, talk show hosts, that would have done some work in the early days with pop TV and radio pop. So it was a place where like expression was really very like it was free. People were free to express. So not as like constricted as if you were living in apartheid South Africa. So I think that was the culture that came in like pre-apartheid, during the apartheid time. And then when it got integrated into South Africa post-94, then some of it still like remained in a way. So, even now more recently, so like Casper Nyovest would be from there. So it always, it was a nice, I guess, like, it was a safe space to grow up. No matter what color or denomination you're from. So everybody was accepted. Everybody, it wasn't as intense. Even, the racial issues were not so intense as I would only learn later about some of these dynamics when I had to go to university in Cape Town, about like aspects of how people would have experienced the rest of South Africa. But I would say that like growing up, I didn't note, like sometimes I had to take note that, my skin color is a little bit different or I look different. But growing up, like everybody considered me Tswana. They were just like, this is just one of us. So it was, in that sense, it was really easy to, interesting to integrate. And then having to go to Cape Town and then mix with people from the rest of the country, you soon realize that, there's a lot of different things happening all over the place. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, sure it does, and thank you. And Vafa, you went to Cape Town. I had to go and check at least 3 websites to make sure I got this right. Instead of studying comedy, to study mechanical engineering. There's not a lot that's funny about mechanical engineering.
Civil engineering, and then I did my master's in structural engineering. So I got two degrees from the University of Cape Town. And that was just, I just needed to figure out how I could disappoint my parents the most. So I was like, let me really study hard. Let me get all of these degrees, get distinctions for it, and then tell them I'm not doing this anymore and I'm leaving. But I think like the serious aspect of it is that my parents, like immigrant parents, they, like probably most parents, really valued education. So they were like, you just need to be useful wherever you are. so that you have a job. So they got me to do that, and I did it, and then I wanted to pursue this comedy. And then I realized that I think, you know, for the most part, they don't completely get it. They are definitely supportive. But from their aspect, you know, the traditional professions are the ones that they value. And I do realize that they had to go through a lot, like coming from, you know, a war state or a revolution and getting kicked out of the country, and it's not being the greatest place. So they didn't have an opportunity to dream. Most of their opportunities were just like, they just thought, let's just survive. And I was like, look, I have all of these faculties available to me. I got my degrees, and now I want to dream, and I want to effect change in a different way. And this is what I want to do with my time. And so, yeah.
And sorry to interrupt, but I mean, when you were growing up, was comedy, maybe not professionally, but were you the kid who was selling jokes at the dinner table? Were you the one who, you know, people in the sports team would say, tell us a joke? I mean, was it always something within you, or did it only come later as you got a bit older?
Yeah, not at all, actually. I was mostly the quiet, shy kid, very observant. So just always stared, looked around. I would only speak if I felt like it was completely necessary for me to say what I needed to say. But I think in many ways that bodes you well as a comedian, because you see a lot more. Because you're just sitting, observing, watching. And then right now I just find myself with just like a wealth of observations, which is great for comedy as well, yeah.
I was going to ask about being observant, because the best comedians that I've seen, and I'm not someone who watches a lot of it, I'm afraid, but the best sort of comedy I've heard, whether it be, I mean, Bill Cosby before his utter disgrace, whether it be, there's some British comedians who are just talking about bringing up children, and just that power of observation is actually one of the most important things. Trevor knows another example. Just being able to observe and then reflecting on your observation. I mean, that's the power of it, isn't it?
100%. And then when you know, comedy is also about you share a perspective, whether it's popular opinion or not. Or it's so you just share a perspective to people, to get to people to see something in potentially a different light. You're not trying to actively change their opinion, but you see it in a different light, and you're like, whoa, I never saw it from this view. This is so hilarious. So it gives people a different perspective, and then it allows people to make their own mind up. Oh, whoa, this is, this is how society is supposed to work, or this is not. So it challenges thought, and to do that, you need to be able to be observant from different lenses. So I do think that, yes, it is definitely, I think that's probably a better skill to have than to be the class clown. So, yeah.
When the clip we played when we started, and you do different, you take off different South African accents. We're incredibly diverse. We've got a wide range of accents. When you do that in front of a crowd, who laughs the most at which accent? And what I'm trying to get to is, do people laugh the most when you're ripping off their own accent? Is that what makes them laugh the most, or is it something else?
The experience of my comedy is that people are not actually. I wouldn't consider myself great at accents. I can do a couple here and there, but people don't laugh at my accent. I think what I've predominantly got feedback from is that people laugh at what I say when, say, I'm saying something. So it's more the content that gets them as opposed to the accent itself. I guess if you get to see even like parts of my work with these short sketches as well, it's about like finding clever ways how to send out certain messaging, whether you're poking at something or not, you're making an observation or not. So it's more actually, I take quite a bit more time looking at like, what's the wording? How am I saying this in the most concise way? What am I trying to say?
You're at the moment you're doing a hashtag Becoming South African. It's your current one-man comedy show. I think your final one is this weekend. Is that about sort of South Africa? I mean, how do you define what a South African is? I sometimes think we're so diverse. I don't know if you can really do that. And yet there are certain things that absolutely we unite behind, and only South Africans unite behind.
So I think that's very much the gist of the show. Like, what is a South African? So I was born and brought up in South Africa. I consider myself like South African. A lot of people like stop me on the road and they're like, "Oh, you're the South African guy." And I was like, "Then what are you?"
Yes.
But like, it challenges that some of these notions and some of these thoughts and some of these prejudices that we have. Like, what is a South African? What do we have to do? How do we act? And it's a journey of me having to, like, clearly I look a little bit racially ambiguous because of my parents' background, but I'm as much a South African as everybody else. And, I've had to learn different languages, adapt in different spaces, metropolitan spaces, more rural areas. And I've got to see a lot, observe a lot. So it breaks down a little bit of, like, the stereotype things that we think are what makes us South African, and then tries to wrap it up in a way of, like, how are we South African? And you're right, we have a lot of commonalities, but at the same time we've got a lot of differences. But that is South African. So it's some of it, like, there's a lot of storytelling in there, some of it relaying some of my perspectives. So a very unique point of view, which you wouldn't get. You don't not often hear about, like, somebody of Persian descent being a South African, and what is he? What's his experience like? So that's what the show is about. So I've done, this is my inaugural tour. So this is my first one-man show, like, that I've done. So it's my first special. And I had a vision at the beginning of this thing. So when I decided over, like, a year ago that I wanted to do this, I wanted to get to every single province.
Yeah.
In the country. And it's not often that you find artists going to because, we're quite polarized. Zulu people would appeal more to Zulu people than they do to the rest of the country. And Xhosa and Tswana, and likewise Afrikaans, English, white people, colored people, and the likes. It's quite segregated in a lot of ways. So you wouldn't find people going all around the country. And I said I wanted to get to every single province. So I've been to every single province. Most of the shows have had overwhelming support, people filling out the venues, we're being over capacity. And this, like, for me, it's really amazing to see how so many people would gather together to do something together. So we've done 10 shows. This will be the 11th one. The last stop is Joburg. And that's at the Gold Reef City at the Linux Theatre this Saturday. And it's been absolutely amazing to see the diversity as well. Like, I think we were in Kimberley and Bloemfontein over Friday and Saturday, sold out shows in both places. And there's white people there, and there's Afrikaans people, and there's colored people, and predominantly Black Sotho people from the areas, or Tswana people, Indian people, and it just looks like South Africa.
Sure.
When you look at the crowd. And then it's also insane that I don't look like anybody in the crowd. And nobody in the crowd looks like anybody else in the crowd. So it's just like, but we can all sit there together and share this common experience of we're all South African, we're all diverse. And truly, I think that's, other than it being hilarious, it is a story of unity. It's a story of like of a challenging perspective where we're like, okay, we're all the same thing. What's this about?
Sure, Vafa, I'm just going to stop you there for a sec, I'm afraid. We're speaking to Vafa Naragi, the comedian. He is our guest on How I Make My Money tonight. 6 minutes to 8.
The Money Show, Stephen Grootes, is brought to you by Absa CIB. Discover the latest trends shaping digital assets across Africa. Download the Absa Africa Digital Assets Insights 2025.
The Money Show, How I Make My Money.
4 minutes now to 8 the time. Vafa Naragi is the comedian. He's telling us how he makes his money. Vafa, there's a sort of funny thing happening in the US where comedy shows are possibly funnier than they've been in a long time. And it's because of their president. And it's because of this kind of comedians versus the president moment. I think sometimes something happened similar here during apartheid. Does that oppression or fear of oppression make comedy a lot more important, and particularly ridiculing people in power?
The fear of oppression. I think especially if somebody is probably going to say something that most people disagree with. It makes it easier for the comedian to say something against, say, the perpetrator, whether it's the president or whoever else is in power. And then that garners more support. And then, I mean, in this particular instance with what's possibly going on in the States is just maybe the ridiculousness of certain statements.
Yeah.
But I think, comedy works better in tragedy because it's you make lighthearted. I mean, even us say post-apartheid, whether it was corruption or scandals or this or that, it was always a scene where say comedy or comedians would thrive. I mean, we can look even to Trevor Noah and the bulk of his content with around the Guptas and the likes, and that was, that's a talking point. Or whether, load shedding or whatever the case is. So whatever tragedy there is, whether it's a president or not, that helps. I wouldn't say necessarily it's fueled by our tendency not to be, what do you call this? You use a specific word.
Oppression, yeah.
Oppression. Not in that sense, but yes, if that is sort of tragedy, then there'd be comedy around that. I think
We've got literally 20 seconds left. Someone comes up to you and says they want to be a comedian. What do they need to do?
Don't do it. Well, they need to. You go about it, open mics. You go test out your material. It takes years and years. Comedians only take about 5-6 years before they even get onto certain stage that you'd be able to see them. So it's a lot of hard work, but it's a beautiful journey. I enjoy it. But yeah, a lot of hard work, a lot of testing out your material, doing a lot of stuff for free for a long time.
Yeah.
Before you find your voice and then and people can resonate to that.
Vafa, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much. Vafa Naragi is the award-winning comedian telling you about how he makes his money tonight on The Money Show.
The Money Show, Stephen Grootes, is brought to you by Absa CIB. Discover the latest trends shaping digital assets across Africa. Download the Absa Africa Digital Assets Insights 2025.
Well, looking at U.S. markets right now, not a great day. The Dow Jones down 0.5%, the Nasdaq down 0.14%, the S&P down 0.21% at the moment. Still fears, I think, and still expectations around interest rates in the United States. We'll be back tomorrow. Look after yourself. Aubrey is next. It's 8 o'clock.